Let's go live now to Matt Tinkler. He's the Chief Executive of Save the Children. Matt, thanks for your time. What were the conditions, or what are they like, where these women and children are?
Hi, Kieran. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I went to these camps in northeast Syria in June, and Tanya Plibersek is right. This is one of the worst places in the world to be a child. Indeed, children are dying in these camps almost every week. When I was there, it was over 45 degrees Celsius every day. It's in the middle of the Syrian desert. The tents are pitched essentially in an oil field, so there are oil wells pumping away in the background with noxious fumes coming through. There's very little access to nutritious food or healthcare. So some of the children I saw were clearly stunted. Their teeth were rotten and falling out. They had suffered from significant impacts on their mental health and had suicidal ideations. These kids, by any measure, are just hanging on. So this news that's broken in the last couple of days, from our perspective, is very welcome, and the repatriation can't come soon enough.
Having been there, do you see now the complexity to have this repatriation, given it has been made public? Does it make it a more tricky situation now?
I don't think so at all, Kieran, and I don't buy the logic from the previous government that it was too dangerous to repatriate citizens from this part of the world. So I'm a case in point. I'm just a bloke from the west of Melbourne who went under his own steam with the support of my organisation, Save the Children, and accessed these camps and talked to the Kurdish administration running them. When I was there, I saw a significant US military presence. The Kurdish administration has offered its support to the repatriation, so have the US government. So it's actually a fairly straightforward exercise to effect the extraction of the women and children from the camps. This was always just a political red herring, in my view, given as an excuse from the previous government, so they didn't have to act.
What have other countries with the wives and children of former IS fighters done?
Yeah, well, dozens of countries around the world have repatriated their citizens, women and children alike. This is the US, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Belgium, Kazakhstan, Russia, the list goes on. They've done what Australia needs to do, and that is brought them home, conducted the proper security and risk assessments, and then really wrapped support and love around those children, provided them with the stability they need, access to education, psychosocial support, and really tried to reintegrate them back into the ways of life of their national country. And Australia's done this before too. We repatriated a group of orphan children back in 2019, and by all reports, those children are now living well in the community here in Australia. So there's a track record here from Australia. We should put the trust in our judicial system, our national security architecture, and our social welfare system to be able to transition these children and their mothers back home to Australia.
What do you say to concerns, Matt, that the women went of their own steam and that a number of them would be radicalised, and that the children too are at risk of a similar fate given what they've seen and where they've been the last several years?
Well, some of the women went under their own steam, but not all of them. Some of them were tricked or coerced or duped. Some were 15 when they went, and by the age of 19 had 4 children to an Islamic State fighter. So that's not free will in anyone's view. So let's get that fact straight first. Secondly, when I went to the camps, I spoke to these women directly. I asked them pointedly, are you willing to offer your full cooperation with Australia's law enforcement authorities upon your return? They said yes to a woman. They have also previously, in an unprecedented fashion, offered to submit themselves to terrorism control orders, which means every facet of their life could be monitored: an ankle bracelet, house arrest, their communications monitored, prevented from meeting certain people. So to the extent that there is a risk of radicalisation or a risk to Australia's national security, we should put our faith in our systems. They are robust and strong for a reason, and they're up to this task, as they have demonstrated with previous cohorts of this nature.
When you were there a few months ago, did you speak to any of the women concerned, and what was your read on it?
Yeah, I spoke to most of the Australian women in the camps at length, and I asked them whether they were willing to come home to Australia and cooperate with law enforcement authorities, to which they said yes, and they all expressed significant distress in terms of their own living conditions and, more importantly, the impact on their children who, whatever you might think of the mothers and the choices some of them may have made, the children are by any measure innocent. And as I've said, they're suffering significant and demonstrable and visible impacts on their health and well-being. It's our real fear, if they're not repatriated soon, that an Australian child will die in those conditions. And we heard early in the year that a young Australian man who was a boy when he was taken to Syria by his parents died in the Syrian prison system. So this fate is not a theoretical risk. It's a risk that's already transpired, and it will transpire against other Australian children if the government doesn't act. So this news, this apparent decision from the government, it can't come soon enough from our perspective.
Finally, those authorities that have oversight of the camp, is there any international aid getting in there? You spoke about the terrible nature of the medical situation for the children particularly. Is there any support pending this repatriation?
Yeah, there is aid getting in. Organisations like Save the Children, the Red Cross and others are operating inside these camps, providing humanitarian relief. But you've got to put that in context, and these camps are staffed by Save the Children staff, for example, who have lived through a decade of conflict in northeast Syria. They themselves are living in accommodation that doesn't have any reliable electricity or running water or air conditioning. They struggle themselves to get food on the table. They don't have a passport to leave that part of the world. So yes, some aid is getting through, but the entire portion of northeast Syria needs aid at almost unprecedented levels. So it's never going to be enough to guarantee the well-being of these women and children. So really the only way Australia can guarantee their safety is to bring them home, as is our moral and legal responsibility as Australian citizens to do so.
Matt Tinkler, Chief Executive of Save the Children, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.